Welcome to the debate, Dehradun. It's a city often evoked as this idyllic retreat, gateway to the Himalayas, home to prestigious schools, and a place consistently associated with peace and safety for families, for students. But this cherished image, really a bedrock of its identity, has recently been shaken quite significantly. A new and frankly startling report has unexpectedly labeled Dehradun as one of India's top 10 least safe places for women.
That's right. And this isn't just some statistical anomaly we're talking about. This ranking, uniquely based on women's perceptions of safety, has really ignited a firestorm of controversy. It's forcing us, I think, to confront a profound clash between what we think we know about a city and maybe what its residents truly experience day to day.
Exactly. So today, we're diving deep into this vital conflict. I'll be arguing that this perception-based report offers crucial, maybe uncomfortable, but crucial insights into the lived realities of women.
And I will be challenging the report's methodology and its potentially damaging conclusions, arguing that we need to be very careful before accepting such a stark label.
Okay, so let's get into it. I firmly believe that the NARI 2025 report, the one published by P-Value Analytics, holds up an invaluable, though perhaps, yes, an uncomfortably honest, mirror to the true ground realities of women's safety in Dehradun. You see, we often rely heavily on official crime statistics, and while those numbers are certainly useful, they frequently fall short of capturing what I sometimes call the pervasive safety shadow. This shadow, it's made up of the nagging worries, the subtle anxieties, the daily precautions women take that simply don't translate into formal police complaints. The NARI report's findings for Dehradun are, well, they're stark. A mere 50% of women surveyed felt safe or highly safe, which is notably below the national average of 60%. Even more concerning, a full 10% explicitly stated they felt unsafe or very unsafe. What really resonates with me, though, are the granular details the report illuminates. The sharp drop in safety perception after dark and alarmingly low scores for public transport, sidewalks, and street lighting. These aren't just abstract figures on a page. They represent the palpable unease of women navigating Rajpur Road with a constant, uneasy awareness of their surroundings, or, the genuine fear of feeling trapped on Paltan Bazaar as night falls. These are everyday incidents of harassment or subtle threats that more often than not never get logged by the 112 emergency service. And considering that many studies estimate only 10–20% of crimes against women are actually reported, a perception-based index like NARI 2025 offers a truly vital, perhaps unvarnished look at what official records are almost certainly missing. It captures a reality that crime statistics simply cannot.
I absolutely agree that ensuring women's safety is paramount. And it is a discussion that we must continuously and thoughtfully engage in, no question there. However, I find myself in strong disagreement with the credibility and, perhaps more significantly, the potentially damaging conclusions drawn from this NARI 2025 report concerning Dehradun. My primary concern, and it's a substantial one, stems directly from the immediate and very rigorous pushback this report has received from authoritative state bodies. I mean, we're talking about institutions like the Uttarakhand State Women's Commission and the Dehradun police themselves. Chairperson Kusum Khandwal of the Women's Commission, for instance, swiftly identified what she termed several serious flaws. She openly questioned the transparency of how survey participants were selected, the specific questions that were posed, and the underlying research criteria employed.
There was also a significant clarification, which I think is important, that the report lacked any formal endorsement from the National Commission for Women, despite some initial suggestions made at its launch. Furthermore, the Senior Superintendent of Police, or SSP Ajay Singh, has taken a particularly firm stance. He has publicly threatened strict legal action against P-Value Analytics if they fail to provide satisfactory answers and complete documentation by September 15, 2025. Now, for a city that has meticulously cultivated a reputation for its serene environment and relative safety, a stark contrast to the often chaotic backdrop of larger metropolitan areas, such a damning report, especially one without what appears to be robust and transparent methodology, is not merely questionable, It's potentially catastrophic for its hard-earned reputation, particularly for the vital tourism and education sectors that are, let's face it, the lifeblood of Dehradun's economy.
The stakes are very high here.
Okay, we've heard compelling opening arguments, one emphasizing the power of lived experience, the other highlighting the necessity of rigorous data. Let's dive deeper into this clash by first examining how we truly validate these two different forms of truth. My colleague raises valid points about methodological transparency, and I absolutely acknowledge the imperative for rigor in any research that seeks to influence public discourse. Of course. However, the very innovation, the very purpose of NARI 2025 is its focus on perception, on that safety shadow I described earlier. You see, official data, such as the Dehradun Police's statistic that only 18% of the 112 emergency calls in August 2025 involved women, or the National Crime Records Bureau, the NCRB, data from 2024 showing Uttarakhand with comparatively lower crime rates against women than, say, Uttar Pradesh or Delhi, well, that data can paint an incredibly incomplete picture. These numbers, while factually correct, simply don't capture the common everyday experiences of harassment or the constant vigilance women often maintain. I'm talking about the casual catcall on Rajpur Road, the lingering uneasy stare in Paltan Bazaar, or maybe the feeling of being followed in a quiet lane. The report highlights specific, tangible concerns: inadequate streetlights in the city's outskirts, overcrowded public buses, and a palpable perception of rising eve-teasing among youth. These factors are crucial to a woman's sense of freedom and security. They often fall entirely outside the purview of crime statistics, but profoundly shape daily life. If women are indeed experiencing these pervasive feelings of unease, regardless of whether a police report is filed, then their perception is a reality we absolutely must confront, because it dictates their mobility and their sense of belonging in the city.
While the concept of perceived safety is undoubtedly important, and I wouldn't dispute its significance as a, let's say, qualitative measure, its utility is severely undermined when the methodology itself remains opaque, and the sample size is, frankly, questionable. An anonymous officer speaking to the press highlighted a significant concern. NARI reportedly surveyed only a fraction, the rumor is around 400 women, when compared to Dehradun's estimated 1.5 million female residents. Now, advocate, what statistical rigor ensures these perceptions aren't just isolated anecdotes, but a truly representative snapshot of the city's vast and diverse female population? Can such a small, unverified sample credibly label an entire city, fundamentally altering its public image? I also find it absolutely crucial to emphasize Dehradun's proactive, concrete measures that are actively working to enhance women's safety.
We're talking about initiatives like the Uttarakhand Police's visible pink patrol vehicles, the SheBox online portal for confidential complaints, over 500 CCTV cameras strategically placed in high-traffic areas, and dedicated women's cells established in every police station. These are not just token gestures. They demonstrate a very tangible, ongoing commitment to safety that seems to be entirely unacknowledged or even contradicted by a report based on such thin evidential grounds. How can we possibly trust a perception when the means of gathering it are so easily challenged by the very authorities and citizens on the ground?
My colleague raises a fair point about the need for statistically robust sampling, and that's a valid critique of, well, any survey, really. However, when we talk about perception, we're often trying to capture something that traditional quantitative metrics struggle with. Those pink patrols and CCTV cameras, while commendable in their intent, they might not penetrate the psychological safety shadow if their presence isn't consistently felt, or if the underlying issues of social behavior and harassment persist. I mean, are those cameras always monitored effectively? Do women feel comfortable approaching a pink patrol for maybe a non-reportable incident, something that just made them feel uneasy?
The report's strength, even with a potentially limited sample, is its ability to direct our attention to where and how these feelings of insecurity are most acute. For instance, the specific concerns about poorly lit areas on the outskirts of the city or specific times of day when unease peaks. This level of granular, lived experience detail often informs policy more effectively than broad crime rates alone, by pinpointing the gaps in the effectiveness of those proactive measures. It's not about discrediting existing efforts, not at all, but about understanding why, despite them, a significant percentage of women still feel unsafe.
I understand the argument for qualitative depth. I do. But the question remains, at what point does qualitative insight become statistically unrepresentative and therefore potentially misleading? A city as diverse and sprawling as Dehradun has varying safety profiles across its localities. The specific examples you mention, like issues in the outskirts or at specific times, are precisely where a robust, stratified sampling method would be crucial to ensure findings are not localized anomalies being generalized to the entire city. Without that transparency, the utility of such insights for targeted policy becomes questionable. Are we addressing a citywide crisis or isolated pockets of concern? We don't know from this. Furthermore, the efforts like Pink Patrol and the CCTV network aren't just about deterring crime. They are also designed to project a sense of security and accessibility. If these proactive measures are indeed failing to alter perception, as you suggest, then we need a methodologically sound study to determine why, rather than relying on a report that, by its own admission through official pushback, lacks the necessary rigor to draw such sweeping conclusions. Otherwise, we risk making policy based on a potentially skewed lens, which could divert resources from areas of genuine, statistically proven need.
So, the question of what truly constitutes reality and safety is a complex one, clearly, navigating between the quantifiable and the felt. But beyond the data itself, there's another crucial angle: the intent behind such reports and their real-world impact. Dissenter, you've strongly critiqued the practical consequences of this report. Can you elaborate, perhaps, on the severity of its impact, particularly for a city like Dehradun?
Absolutely. The academic report defense offered by P-Values representative, this Mayank Dehia at the Senior Superintendent of Police's office, well, it felt conspicuously vague when pressed for specifics, particularly the exact number of women polled in Dehradun. An intent to merely spark dialogue does not, in my view, excuse a potentially flawed methodology that threatens to inflict significant, tangible economic and reputational damage. Look, local organizations representing traders and hotel owners, they immediately cried foul, demanding answers from the police precisely because this report directly threatens their livelihoods. We're talking about the nightmare scenario of hotels sitting half empty, tour guides idle, and families potentially reconsidering Dehradun as a place to send their daughters for education.
Even the political arena saw heated exchanges, with the opposition Congress Party seizing on the report to criticize the ruling BJP-led government, turning it into a political football. This is far more than just a dialogue or an academic exercise with benign intentions. It's a full-blown row, and the ramifications for Dehradun are far too severe for the report to be dismissed as a mere catalyst for conversation. The impact must be weighed against the methodology's rigor, and here, that balance seems profoundly off.
I see why you think that, and I understand the genuine concern about economic and reputational fallout. No one wishes harm upon Dehradun's thriving sectors, of course not. However, the creators of NARI 2025, P-Value Analytics, and the North Cap University, they insist their work is fundamentally an academic report, intended to spark dialogue and highlight gaps for improvement, not to be some kind of punitive judgment. Professor Manjula Batra, she's a heavyweight in legal academia and the principal investigator, has a long and distinguished history of research in human rights and gender justice. The credibility of the researchers themselves, I think, lends weight to their stated academic purpose. While local traders and political figures have, understandably, expressed concern over its impact on tourism and the city's image, the report has undeniably ignited vital conversations. From the smallest chai stalls right up to the highest state houses.
If it highlights real gaps, such as persistently dim-lit alleys or public transport that feels insensitive or unsafe for women, then it serves as a necessary wake-up call. It pushes for concrete improvements that will ultimately and profoundly benefit the women of Dehradun, regardless of its initial, perhaps uncomfortable reception. Sometimes a jolt is precisely what's needed to spur genuine, systemic action,
even if the delivery isn't perfectly palatable.
That's a compelling argument about intent, advocate, but I would frame it differently. While the academic credentials of the individuals involved are not in question, the process by which these findings were gathered and then disseminated publicly, particularly without prior engagement with local authorities or a clear outline of methodology, that appears problematic. An academic report intended for internal scholarly discourse or peer review is one thing. A report that is publicly launched with claims of ranking cities, directly impacting livelihoods and political narratives, well, that carries a far greater ethical and methodological burden. The vagueness Mayank Dahiya showed at the SSP's office when pressed for specifics, like the actual number of women polled, suggests a gap between academic ideal and practical transparency. If the intent truly was just to spark dialogue and highlight gaps for improvement, why not collaborate with local bodies from the outset?
Why not share the methodology for scrutiny before releasing potentially damaging unverified rankings? The jolt you speak of is undeniably occurring, but it feels more like an uncontrolled shockwave than a targeted intervention, and the collateral damage to Dehradun's image and economy is a very real immediate consequence that cannot be simply brushed aside as a necessary discomfort.
This clearly brings to light a tension many cities face: how to balance the need for critical, perception-based assessment with the responsibility to ensure such assessments are robust and don't inadvertently harm the very communities they aim to help. Dissenter, you've articulated the risks well. From my side, what's lost if we only focus on official numbers and disregard the felt experience, even with methodological imperfections?
What's lost, fundamentally, is the human element. If we rigidly adhere only to official crime statistics, we risk creating a false sense of security. We might celebrate lower reported crime rates while ignoring the pervasive safety shadow that dictates how half the population lives their daily lives. We would miss the nuances of harassment that don't escalate to police intervention, the subtle threats that erode confidence, and the systemic issues in urban planning or public services that make women feel vulnerable.
Focusing solely on numbers allows us to potentially neglect the proactive measures that aren't working to change perceptions, or to overlook the specific vulnerabilities that women face in spaces like Rajpur Road after dark, even if no crime is officially recorded there. The real cost is a city that, despite its best intentions, fails to truly understand and cater to the security needs of all its residents, leading to an erosion of trust and freedom for women.
And advocate, what's your biggest concern if we prioritize perception over statistical rigor entirely, especially when that perception is based on a challenged methodology?
My biggest concern, if we were to prioritize perception entirely without rigorous statistical validation, is that we risk falling into a trap of anecdotal evidence or even, inadvertently, perpetuating biases. An unverified perception-based index can be easily influenced by media narratives, isolated incidents, or even individual anxieties that aren't broadly representative. If we ignore methodological rigor, we might allocate precious resources to address issues that, while genuinely felt by some, are not systemic or widespread, potentially neglecting areas with statistically proven urgent needs. Moreover, it undermines the very concept of evidence-based policymaking.
How can local authorities, police, and urban planners make informed decisions about infrastructure, patrolling, or public awareness campaigns if the foundational data is questioned by the very bodies meant to implement the solutions? We would be making decisions in the dark based on potentially unreliable signals. And in doing so, we could inadvertently damage a city's reputation, divert resources, and ultimately fail to improve safety for anyone in a meaningful, measurable way. The intention, as you say, might be good, but the execution needs to be demonstrably sound for it to be useful.
Indeed. This discussion highlights the complex interplay between data, perception, and the multifaceted nature of safety in our cities. It's clear that understanding security in a place like Dehradun isn't a simple matter of looking at a single set of numbers or listening to a single narrative.
The quest for true security in Dehradun, as in any place, is an evolving and continuous process. It demands diverse perspectives, critical evaluation of all claims, and certainly a willingness to integrate different forms of knowledge. There is clearly much more to explore within this material, and the conversation is far from over.